On this podcast, we will talk about the tools we have used in order to remind us who and what we are.
We will talk about the spiritual technologies that bring us back to the knowing that we are sovereign.
That bring us back to God. The only actual advice you will get on this podcast is to consult within.
The rest is all the things that happen when you do it.
My name is Jasai.
And my name is Stori.
And this is Sovereign You. Welcome to Sovereign You. I am Jasai and
I'm Stori.
And we are here because we are teachers in our everyday, real life, working life. We own and operate Alaiyo Waistbeads, which is a mindfulness tool that has as its function some mindfulness technology. And in the course of that work, we get a lot of people who come to us asking questions. There's a lot of new language in the work that we do in the world. And so we are here hoping to sort of give some insight, not only about what we do and how we do it, but how we came to do this kind of work in the world. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right.
All right. So today's episode is really going to be all about sovereignty. The name of this podcast is Sovereign You, like Sovereign University. And our aim is to teach people how to be sovereign, how to use the energy of their own knowing in their own life in order to become the highest version of themselves. So we're going to start every episode with a check-in. So I'm going to check in with you, Stori. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am fantastic. How was your week?
Good. Busy.
Busy. What do you, besides working at Alaiyo, what are you doing in your week that has you busy this week?
I also cashier at Wingstop, so I have a pretty full schedule. I work 7 days a week, and typically I take 2 shifts in each day. So I'll work at Alaiyo for the beginning of the day, and then I'll go to Wingstop. And then if I'm working at Alaiyo, I just work at Alaiyo all day. So.
I like it. All right. Did you learn anything new this week on the job, on the way to the job, at your house? What'd you learn this week?
I learned not to take things personally, honestly, because I just feel like when you're dealing with new personalities, especially with my new job, it's easy for you to be like, oh, this person is treating me kind of interesting. So my coworkers were noticing like, oh, that this person was treating me in a very particular way. And I was like, oh, yeah, I wasn't sure that other people noticed. And they were like, oh, no, she's like that with everybody. And I was just like, okay. From that point, I was able to reference all the times that I took her behavior personally. And I was able to completely like wipe it from my spirit and from my psyche. Like, you know what? This has nothing to do with me. This is everything to do with her.
That is, first of all, so beautiful and so important. It just saves us. It saves our energy. It saves the day.
And I think you can assume that most of the time that people are treating you in a way that you can't really reference or kind of bring back to any energy or any behavior that you've given them.
Absolutely. I know when you were younger, I would say to you and to your brother, everything everybody does is about them.
Right.
That is never not true. So it's hard to remember that because we also live in a very self-centered experience so much of the time. But, you know, reminding ourselves that everything everybody does is about them allows us to be like, ooh, let me
get out of your way.
Let me let her through because something's happening right now.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, bravo.
And what about you?
This week has been beautiful. I always start with beautiful because it helps me with perspective. I know every time something happens to me, whether it is easy or difficult, it's always beautiful because it is an opportunity. So I got asked how my week was. Was it productive? And I said, yeah, it was a lot of inside work. It was a lot of productive inside work, not a lot of productive outside work. Although I don't gauge my weeks, thank goodness, on outside productivity, especially because of the nature of what we do. Um, I'm always paying attention to how am I being? How am I responding to what life is offering me right
Mm-hmm.
now? And so there was a lot of feeling my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
being very present to how I was feeling in response to how life was lifing. And although it was difficult, it felt good to like be there in the difficult moment with my eyes open, not in resistance, and saying, you know what? This is like this right now. And I
Yeah.
don't even know what it's going to be like. I don't know what the result of this is going to be, but
And
I know right now I'm fine.
I feel like that's essential to productivity too, because when you do intend on doing outside work, intend on working on Alaiyo, intend on doing things for the business, at least if a negative emotion comes up, you have the practice of letting it go, letting it flow, and attending to it as opposed to just letting it interfere with the work.
Absolutely. So, yes, that was great. It was harrowing. It really was. I was sometimes you have experiences that are difficult, and when you're with them, when you're paying attention to them, it could sometimes take your breath away. You're like, "Oh, wow, this is really happening." And I think that sometimes we don't pay attention because we don't want what's happening to be happening, but when we really look at it, we're like, "Wow. I've come here. I've
Mm.
I've reached this point, in the road." So that was that. It was great, and I'm glad to be on the other side of it. It's like the morning after it has rained all week, which we are familiar with right now. Um, and then the sun is out, and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't just rain forever." And so now we are going to just examine sovereignty. When I thought about doing this, because we had, gone over a couple of ways that we could gather our community and talk to them about the things that are important for the practice of being mindful, which is, what we're always teaching people here at Alaiyo. And I think I was like, well, what will we call it? What will be the framework for it? And sovereignty came up for me because I know that what's been helpful for me is understanding that if I have a problem, if I feel like I have a problem, embedded in that problem is also the solution.
Mm.
That no challenge comes and presents itself without the solution being attended with it. But in order to actuate that, in order to live in that, bless you, in order
Thank
to
you.
live in that, we have to be clear that we are it,
Mm.
that I have a problem and I also have the solution is a deep form of sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so I think that whenever I'm teaching somebody, anything, or whenever I'm listening to somebody share what their challenge is, my thought is, what's your role? What can you do? What can you control? What because all the things that are going to be most accessible to you are going to come from you.
Yeah.
If you need somebody else to do it, maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not. And so that's what I see out in the world. I see a lot of challenge because with all of these dynamics, of course, there's going to be challenge. Everything that's happening can't be beneficial to the same person all the time. And so we have to sort of trade this experience of challenge. Um, I see that, and I see people really, really struggling with that. Like, why me? Why am I having this challenge? Why is it feeling bad? Why,
Mm.
why? And to me, sovereignty means understanding that, yes, this thing is happening, but because I am a thing, because I am a vessel, because I am an intelligence, I have something also in me to support myself through whatever's going on. So my aim here is to look at aspects of life, aspects of work, relationships, um, our interior life, and help people figure out what kind of tools, what kind of spiritual tools, what kind of spiritual technologies, what kind of practices can help me stay in touch with the reality that I am the answer to my own life, basically.
And so much of that actually just sounds like accountability too, because when I was younger, that was something that you would teach me. Like whenever I would get into it with my teacher or I would have a challenge, you would say, or I would bring you the challenge, you would say, well, how did you contribute to it? You know?
Which is hard for
So,
people to hear. That's really hard for people to hear. I watch people's faces when I ask them their role,
mhm.
and they gets really confused. And
But that's the only way that you can. So from that point, that's the only way that you can solve it is if you're a part of the problem. That's the only way you can solve it. Because if it is solely somebody else, then there's nothing
nothing,
you can do about it.
not one thing. Which
Yeah.
is hard. Again, people are. I think it's a kind of cross-eyed, bleary-eyed. Like, well, what do you mean? Somebody can't just get it together and then I be fine. Well, no, no, that's not possible because you're involved. If something's impacting you, you're involved.
Right.
How not to be impacted is a huge, huge, huge tool.
So how does sovereignty show up in your life?
I work on seeing me. I am Frida Kahlo said something to the effect of I draw me or I paint me because I'm the subject I know best. I work with the subject of me because I'm the subject I know best. When somebody is misbehaving, I don't really know why they're doing that. I can know how it's impacting me, but I don't know enough information on the outside of me to really affect any change. I can know, okay, well, why is the answer that they gave you making you feel unheard?
Mm-hmm.
Because that all of the sort of fodder for that, all of the soil for that comes from my life. Maybe it was from when I was a little girl. Maybe it was from when I was a teenager. But the answer to why I'm affected the way I'm affected is in me. And so, because I want to be sane and I want to feel safe no matter what the world or other people in the world are doing, I check on me. I say, why did you respond that way? What made you so angry? What made you so upset? And I find that there are a whole host of things going on inside me that if I wasn't paying attention, they would take over and rule my life.
Mm.
And then that is not being sovereign. I am not above what's happening here at the ground level. And I want that. I know that, the king of a realm has some advantages than somebody who's a serf, than somebody who's sort of a common person. Whether that's good or bad, or whether that, that to me, I could operate in my life like a serf. Or I could operate in my life like somebody who's sort of in the middle ground. But I know that there's a king role. I know that there is a sovereign role in every scenario, energetically, certainly. And I aim for that for my life just because in the times where I've experienced it, it's the most comfortable for me. And you, sovereignty in your life. First of all, how, if you could share with me one of the ways you practice being a sovereign in your own life.
So the way that sovereignty shows up for me in my life is just how I cultivate being a young entrepreneur and supporting myself.
Mm.
So I literally just have to learn how to take care of myself. And I feel like that is a practice of sovereignty in and of itself.
For sure.
Understanding that I've been raised to a certain quality and now it's time to raise myself. Like now it's time to really take care of myself. And now that I'm also considering becoming a parent in the next few years and starting a family, I'm like, okay, let me get really good at taking care of myself so that when it's time to take care of somebody else, it's not like I'm still learning or I'm still trying to figure it out for myself.
Yeah. And we're thank God. I think one of the things that, in exploring sovereignty, one of the things that is deeply evident to me is that we're always going to be learning. There are levels to this thing. Yeah. And that's the most exciting part about living for me right now is I know that there is no pinnacle. So I'm done chasing that. I'm done chasing the part where I get there and then stop and rest and we just float. I'm not looking for that anymore. What I am super excited about is all of the levels to learning.
Like just consistency and flow and not, like, what do you mean by like a point where you stop?
So I think that when I was younger, I was always thinking at some point this is going to get good, it's going to be perfect, and then I'm a coast.
Oh no. And that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, I'm going to get good at taking care of myself, but I still have never been a mother.
Right.
So I'm still going to be learning and evolving from that space, but I don't want to be thinking about my basics when I'm trying to cultivate the basics of my child's life, especially because children look up and look to their parents so closely for guidance, not only for their current experience, but how they are going to be in the future.
Absolutely.
You know, so I want my child to have a strong standing on who they're going to be in their future.
I love that. So who you're going to be, this is always an interesting conversation.
Or how they're going to be.
Amongst my peers when we were talking about children, because people are often shocked when I say I don't have any investment on who my children became. I was not the parent that was like, oh, these would be ideal jobs for my children, or this would be an ideal path for my children. Or I was sort of like, who are these people? Mm-hmm. These people every day are waking up and showing me who they are. And to the best of my ability, I can support that. I can figure out what kind of tools and technologies are going to help support this human being who's saying, oh, I like football. I remember when your brother told me he wanted to play football. I, as a person, in my personality, was mortified by that. I'm like, and all of my fears and all of my stuff came up, and I had to check myself. Like, Jasai, whatever you think about football players, whatever you think about the sport of football, whatever you think, all your business.
Right.
Not your life. So if this human standing in front of you is saying, I want to express myself in this way, can I be supported? Yeah, your job is to nod and smile and not try to think of excuses not to let this person be who they clearly are showing you they want to be.
Right.
That is not easy when you're a parent. I think particularly in the West, because the TV and all the magazines have all this advice for how to steer your children in the right direction.
So it's important to practice sovereignty, but also lend it.
Absolutely. Lend your understanding and your knowing, hopefully at some point, that people come here to be who they are. Mm-hmm. That people come here to be sovereign, to be themselves. If everyone did that, because everyone here is unique. Like we say that, we say we understand that, and then somebody does something unique and we call it weird. Somebody has a different opinion and we call it wrong. No, they're sovereign.
I feel like that's really only people who lack the ability to be independent, though.
Perhaps.
Yeah, totally only people who lack the ability to be independent call other people weird.
But it happens. We hear it all the time, which means that there are a great many of us here who aren't sovereign, who don't practice being okay with who they are first. Because that's the thing. It's easier to be okay with how someone else dresses, how someone else talks, how someone else thinks, what someone else finds interesting. If you're good in what you do, exactly. If you're good with how you dress, you don't care how somebody else dresses.
Well, because I think that there's like some sort of understanding for that person. I can only assume, because I really don't judge people from that perspective. But I think that there is some sort of assumption that there's a standard.
Yeah.
So if you don't meet that standard, then the person is like, what are you doing out here surviving and
not
thriving, not following the standards I've been following?
Listen.
You know?
Sovereignty. So, I'm out here being myself.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful opportunity. Yeah. It's a beautiful opportunity. And I think that the people around us make space for that opportunity. It's such a beautiful opportunity to be able to be yourself, to get to try on different selves. When you were growing up, and this is one of the beautiful benefits of being a parent, if you're awake in your parenting, is that you really do get to see, oh, this thing just keeps blooming. Like it just keeps being something else. Mm-hmm. And I know I told you the story that I think I have gotten comfortable with stages of the plants growing, stages of my life, stages of other people's lives, because I've watched children grow with my eyes open. Right. And I remember when your brother was in preschool and he was biting all the children. And not only is that his problem and the lady at the school's problem and the person being bitten's problem, but then it's my problem because now maybe I can't go to work because she's kind of kick him out of daycare. Like,
Right.
People's actions have consequences, and sometimes even people who are not you, their actions have consequences on you. And I think sometimes that's the thing that makes the world want to steer people in a narrow lane. They're like, you know what? I don't want you doing this because somehow that's going to impact me. But, God is wise. And in this particular case, God happened to be a Black woman in the form of my mother, because my biting son bit my mother. And my mother bit my son back. And I was like, so the sovereignty in her, like the being present in her, like the knowing was like, no, I know what this is.
Yeah.
I know.
And as a grandmother, she wasn't even going to like clear it with you.
No,
I'm just
she's above
him.
that.
I'm going to bite him.
I was right there.
This is the mother is my child, and then the child of the mother is also my child.
And she bit him, and I was mortified. I was mortified because we trying to teach that biting is wrong. And you bit my child. Like, I'm having kind of these conflicts. But then there is that other thing, like, oh, this happened. What is this that just happened? And what happened was a fix. What happened was someone who knew better, like God knows better, often in our lives, because God is way further up the road and outside of the road than us. My mother knew, oh, he's biting because he doesn't know how it feels to be bitten.
Right.
That is going to be impactful for him. That's new information. And sometimes our willingness, I'm sure that he wasn't open to being bitten, but I guess if you're biting people, you are.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just biting people and you're biting your peers and they're just going off and crying, that gives you a kind of like power play, right?
And again, frustration, because now that I'm this far up the road, I know, oh, that's what people do when they're frustrated. They lash out.
Mm-hmm.
That was his sovereignty in action. Like, this is what I can do at the level of my sort of awareness and experience to get my frustration out. And then as soon as the karmic response to that comes back to you in that same action, and then from your grandmother, you're a new creature. You have learned a new thing, and you become clearer about how the world works for you, how you should operate, how it could be a benefit and a detriment, your behavior. I mean, you learn so many things by simply being alive and having actions and reactions and then taking responsibility. He never bit anyone else again, ever. And so that is, to me, I'm here to teach that. I'm here to offer space for people to understand that life is going to life. It's going to do that. That's how this earth school goes. That you're going to learn. However you learn is a benefit. And then you're going to become a new thing. And then this makes you more. Makes you the ruler of your own life. And then you're not looking to other people to make it right or make it good or make it better. Because you know that your life is in your own hands. Which is fun for me. It's better than I'm a Leo, and I've always been not interested in being told what to do or bossed around.
Yeah, I feel like while adulthood is what it is and it has its inherent challenges, I would never opt to be a child again.
Oh.
Ever.
Why?
Like the inability to do exactly what you want. And I feel like even as you become adult and you become a responsible adult, especially as a young adult with limited resources, you start to realize, okay, well, I still can't do whatever I want, And so it kind of gives you a perspective into the things that your parents did say no about. You're like, okay, maybe they were like making sure that like there was a checks and balance.
I like it.
That things stayed consistent. And while I may not have had this, I always had this.
Beautiful.
And so I feel like that's what I'm starting to learn. But yeah, no, I would never, ever opt to be a child.
Again. Me either. We is the same there. All right. So one of the pieces of this podcast that is super special to me, because as y'all can see, if you're on audio, you cannot see, but we are sitting in Alaiyo's library. This beautifully situated, color coded, chakra relevant library full of all of the ways that I used to learn exclusively. So, reading was the way that I used to take in information in order to sort of learn about the world around me, and particularly about the things that interest me. So I don't have books up here about how to be a mechanic or how to, I don't know, make clothes. I have things here that are germane to my curiosities, which is one of the things that's super, super important if you're talking about being sovereign. Being curious about who you are, being curious about what you're curious about. Like, I wonder why I'm
Right.
curious about plants. I wonder why I'm curious about fabric. Because
Yes.
everybody doesn't have the same interest. And so I am interested in books because of what they allow me to understand and know about the world from that vantage, from an outside vantage. And these days, the way I'm learning is I'm learning from the inside. But there is a book that gave me a glimpse of that, and it's called Conversations with God, an Uncommon Dialogue. This book is from Neil Donald Walsh, and it was a curious book to me when I first picked it up over a decade ago because it was laid out in a way that no story had ever been that I had read. And basically, it is a man who says that he was going through a really hard time in his life. And then, at the sort of brink, which we've all been at, he just was like, why? What the fuck? Like, what is happening here? And then he heard a response from inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just kept engaging the energy of that responder, if you will. And this whole dialogue came out that was a conversation between him and God.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it intrigued me. It interests me. It made me like, oh my God, I wish. And now I live a life where I'm in conversation with God at all times. It is it makes me speechless. It makes me speechless because I knew it was possible and I didn't even know it was possible all at the same time. So this book, if you're interested in the spiritual technology of being present and what that can lend itself to, I guess. Reading this book is super, super, super interesting. And I feel like for people who have some kind of spiritual practice or spiritual aim that they're already engaged in, it'll be super familiar. Super, super, super familiar. So I encourage you, if that's your vibe, that's a great book to check out. Um, and then we have a segment where people write in because we do have a lot of community that has questions about various things. We decided, okay, we're going to take some questions. And so I'm going to hand you my little wisdom owl here so you can pick this question out of here
Okay.
and answer it as well.
Okay. So it says, how long does it take to trust yourself so that you don't suffer from doubt? How long does it take for you to trust yourself? I think that's a gradual process. I don't think there's a timeline on it. But to the point of trusting yourself to move forward, I think that just comes with trial and error. And so if your life is laid out through, or my life is laid out through a series of tasks.
Okay.
So once I am in pursuit of a particular task, maybe I have failed, maybe I haven't. That's what kind of builds my trust towards my ability to do what it is that I have to do.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I feel like I don't feel like that's like across the board thing for me.
Okay.
I think that it just comes with whatever's in front of me. That's what I learned to trust. But as far as being like, oh, I trust myself to do anything, I feel like I do. But at the same time, it's like, I would still have to attempt it. I would still have to do it. I would still have to build the trust. That's kind of like even with dealing with people, I feel like it's the same kind of comparison. Do you trust all people? No. But the people that you come into interaction with, even people that you meet, you learn to trust them. So I feel like I learned to trust my ability to do whatever's in front of me, especially if it's like a new thing.
The word that stood out in that question to me was suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Suffering from doubt is, like you said, depending on what the circumstance is in front of you, you could doubt it. I mean, you could doubt it because you've never seen it. You could doubt it.
And it's interesting because you could be a really sure person and experience doubt.
Absolutely.
But I just think that you have to be clear about, okay, no, this is new. Just like with this podcast, I had to realize like, oh no, this is just a new thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm challenged by the fact that it's new, and I'm not challenged by the overall fact of it just being a thing.
Okay.
And I feel like I definitely spoke too soon when I spoke against it in a way, but I think that that's what happens. Like when doubt seeps in, then so does fear. And so if you don't allow it to just be new and to be like, oh no, you can mess up. Oh no, you cannot be good, you know? Because I feel like that's really what hinders people from starting new things, is that they're like, oh, well, I won't be good at it. But why would you?
That's the suffering.
Why should you be good at it? Yeah. You know? So yeah, I feel like even if you're great, you do experience maybe a phase of doubt. Yes. But you can overcome that.
And you overcome it basically with practice. So when do you get there is you're always getting to some overcoming of doubt of something or another.
Right.
And the way that you get to that is you just get out there and you do it. Be willing to be wrong, be willing to stumble, be willing to learn.
Yeah.
Be willing to have the experience that's going to take away some corner of the doubt until the whole thing is gone.
Right.
All right. And so that is our episode for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Yes, thank you.
If you are interested in the long form video of this podcast, you can head over to our Patreon and become a member. And you can also follow us at Sovereign U Pod on Instagram. And if you have questions that you would like to submit for a story or I to answer, we would love for you to submit them in the DM. You can feel free to send them that way, and then we will put them in the Wisdom Owl and see what we come up with.
Thank you.
My joy is now. Altogether lovely, pleasure and abundance. All things as it should be, pleasure and abundance.